Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod. We have Fiona Lake with us. Fiona is a founder and chief remote pilot at Rural Drone Academy. She's been in photography for more than 35 years. So we're going to speak about drones. She's a renowned speaker in the same topic on conferences around the world. This podcast is brought to you by podpire.com. If you want to start your own podcast, if you want to scale your podcast and monetize, go to podpire.com. Fiona, glad to have you on the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Thanks, Charles. I started out as a photographer selling photos first in 1982. I used to sell them when I went to ag college so that people knew what they were doing on the Saturday night before. And I grew up on a farm. I worked in agriculture, started taking photos on the biggest cattle stations from mustering helicopters. When the best off-the-shelf drone came out, which is 2016, that's when I moved into drones, and I looked for training, couldn't find any, learnt the hard way, and then set up the training I wanted on day one. And I thought there would only be a couple of years life in it, but there's still actually a need for it. Yeah.
How did you get into drones? When was the first time you actually piloted one?
That was in 2016, yeah, because that's when DJI released the Phantom 4, and it was good enough to get off the shelf and fly and get commercially viable images. The drones before that you had to mess around with, and they just weren't as reliable or as good quality. It was really the Phantom 4 that changed the consumer drone industry.
Why did you get into drones?
Well, I love an aerial view. I've taken aerial photos since the late 1980s. And the beauty of drones is autonomy for me. I often get asked, oh, do you get excited by a drone? Well, no, I don't. It's a tool. And I love the view it gives me. But having spent so many years flying in helicopter, I was kind of spoilt. I still get excited about flying in a helicopter because mustering helicopters don't have the doors on. So you get a really good view, you get a really good breeze, and the pilots are always interesting as well to talk to. So I still get excited about that, but it's the convenience of a drone. Where I go is often very remote, and I can fly it whatever time I want, wherever I want, however long I want. Whereas when I get lifts with other people, obviously the timing is always a compromise. But helicopter charter is very, very expensive and not financially viable in the areas where I go.
Why do you think DJI has grown so fast?
They've been super clever. They're kind of like bowerbirds. Australia has a bowerbird, a species of bird called a bowerbird that collects things from other places to put in their bower. And I think they're like that. They have picked the eyes out of every single feature that comes on the market and then puts it all together. I mean, because the parts in their drones too, they don't actually make parts. They're from mobile phones, from laptops, from all other kinds of technology, and they just parcel it all together. And it's just so user-friendly and now so reliable. And user-friendly, reliable, and affordable. It's made them very, very difficult for anyone else to match it.
I still remember buying my first DJI Sparks and crashing it like 30 minutes after its first use, and it just got crazy, lost connection, and it crashed in some parking. That was in like 2017 or something like that. What improvements have you seen in DJI drone?
Yeah, there used to be a lot of software. Well, when I say a lot, I mean over the years it's gradually improved. Originally, there were a lot of software glitches, and I think it's very easy for us all to forget just how amazingly complex these machines are. The effectiveness of the GPS, and I'm old enough to still be amazed that you can stand there with your phone and connect to satellites, and up this end of Australia, you'll get 21, 27 satellites, I think, is the most I've connected with. And I still think that's incredible that something so tiny, because if you told someone 30 years ago that this would be possible, they would have laughed, you know, they're just, yeah, whatever, dream on. They are amazing bits of technology. So the amount of testing that's required to produce a reliable drone, DJI would probably do themselves a favour if they actually explained what they have to put into testing, because I think none of us have any idea, particularly if you're using a phone as a screen. So whenever they release new software, they have to obviously go out and test with all the major brands, the major models with phones for glitches. Yeah, I think now we've got to the point where we do all take it too much for granted, the complexity and just the ability of what these machines can do.
How have you seen drones being used in the military context and precise fleet in Ukraine and in Palestine?
I guess I tend to stay away from that kind of field simply because it's not my area, and I tend to avoid. I mean, this is just me. I've never watched the news. I've never watched the TV news. For example, I tend to tune into things that I think I can change and actually have some impact on. And I think that this is kind of a mental health related thing for me. I have a good imagination. I don't need to see graphic images. I don't need to. If we had the power to change what happens over there, I would tune into it, but we don't. So I don't. This is leading down a whole other can of worms. But it is really concerning whenever you have, and I guess it's like the equivalent of having online trolls, people who will say things online that they wouldn't say in person. You know, it's obviously much easier. Australia has very strict gun control laws, and some people say, oh, yeah, but you can kill people with the knives. But the reality is you have to face someone, you have to come up close to them. Whereas with a gun, you can shoot them from a big distance. And the problem, of course, with drones is would be very easy to kill people from a distance. So that actually changes the nature of the whole, you know, conflict. Yeah, so that's actually a really big discussion topic, but that's kind of my summary.
Yeah, well, at least nowadays, I think, yeah, some wars can be waged online through hacking. So it's less worse than humans dying, in my opinion. And a lot of drones, they're used in reconnaissance work to avoid casualties and also to help victims being rescued. So these are good things about drones. What are you seeing on the AI field of things in the drone world? Is image recognition getting better and faster? Is flight decision being smarter nowadays?
Yes, probably my favorite topic in that department would be machine recognition of weeds at different stages of growth. For example, we have a weed called cane grass, which grows in sugarcane and it looks very much like sugarcane. And at the moment, there is no software accurate enough to discern it from the sugarcane. And for spot spraying drones, and I'm hoping, obviously, we'll get to the point where the software in the drone can accurately recognise the difference between the weed and the crop when they're very similar, like cane grass and sugarcane, and you'll be able to send it on an automated mission to go and spray the weeds, and especially the weeds when they're small before they're seeded. And you'll only have to do that for a few years and you will have broken the cycle. Just in our country, weeds cost an estimated $8 billion annually. So if the government actually spend a few hundred million really ramping up weed recognition, because it is a money problem. It requires inputting so many images to teach a machine what human beings can just learn relatively quickly. It is a money problem, and spending a few hundred million to save billions is kind of a no-brainer. But I don't know anywhere in the world that that is actually happening. So that's on my wish list.
Nowadays, as a speaker, what do you like speaking about in conferences?
My favorite thing, and I'll only ever talk about things that other people aren't talking about. I detest myself sitting in front of someone talking about the same old, reinventing the wheel. And there's been a lot of that go on at drone events and events generally, but particularly drone events, or people just giving an advertisement for what they do. A recent one just last week in Canberra, Australia's largest drone conference run by AAUS. I had a 15-minute talk and I talked about the lack of engagement of the commercial sector with the recreational sector. And you're talking about organisations with several thousand members versus Facebook groups with tens of thousands of members. They have the numbers, they're just not organised. And a lot of what some sectors in the commercial industry push for is actually to the detriment of the recreational drone owners. And the other thing is that there's a lot of misinformation, and most of the bad PR comes actually from the recreational sector. So my talk was talking about the figures and who is in these drone groups and why we should engage with them, and also why commercial operators should push local councils, local governments to create drone parks, because this would be one of the best ways to get kids choosing STEM careers. Because families can go out and they've got a designated park where they know they're allowed to fly their drone, and they're not worried that someone's going to go and tell them off. They're not going to get in trouble, because in many parts of the world that is a problem now. So we need spaces where parents can take kids to fly drones, and there's multiple benefits, huge benefits from that. So I try and think of all the things that quite often people are saying them, but because I'm self-employed, I'm able to be more forthright than someone who runs a large company, for example. I have autonomy and I have nothing to lose. I've worked in the industry for a long time. And I actually encourage a lot of people who've been in an industry for a long time to step up their public speaking for this reason, because you can be more outspoken. You already have a track record. You have less to lose. And you can discuss things that someone early on in their career is really too risky for them to talk about, you know.
What are the benefits with drones? I was speaking to a large animal management company in New Zealand the other day, and I was telling them about drones, and I could clearly see the use cases for them, but apparently it was something somewhat new that they were exploring. They were more in fencing and other types of IoT device. What are the benefits of using drones as a farmer, quote unquote?
Well, a lot of people saw agriculture as a cash cow, and they went in and tried to sell very expensive solutions and create a lot of data that farmers, they're business people, they don't have spare time, they don't have time to analyze more data for a lot of inappropriate uses. And COVID thankfully did get rid of a lot of the snake oil sellers, but the very best uses, honestly, for drones in agriculture, 99% of them are really simple uses. Checking whether a fire has gone out overnight. You can fly a drone and see whether there's any smouldering logs. You can use a thermal camera to find feral animals or to find livestock that are a similar colour to the ground when you're mustering. Checking aerials that have ceased to function to see what the problem is before you actually climb the ladder. There's a lot of deaths due to falls from ladders and windmills, things like that, anything at height. There's a million and one things, sighting fence lines when you've got timber or hills, putting a drone up and running a video of a stockyard to show how the cattle are running to improve the yard or build a new yard with a better design. And I love running ag drone workshops, because every time there will be people in the room who say, oh, they had these great ideas. Oh, I could use it for this. I could use it for that. A lot of these uses are simple and they don't need an expensive drone, and you don't need a lot of experience. So, yeah, so often the complex uses are oversold and the simple uses are undersold.
Seems that it can also be used for weather events, I guess? Like, have you seen some use cases in there?
Yeah, if you're talking about natural disasters, I mean, for the remote areas where I go, they could be used to check river crossings, for example, particularly in areas where there's crocodiles. So you can fly a drone over a road that's underwater and check for potholes and things like that before you drive your vehicle over. So very, very practical. I mean, just the other day in the Northern Territory, there was a video someone took of driving through water, and there was actually a big saltwater crocodile swimming along beside the vehicle and the road. So that's a case when you can't get out and walk the road to check before you drive it. But if you have a drone, you can fly over and have a really good look, because you can see the currents. Even if you can't see right through the water, you can see different currents, which indicate whether there might be holes in the road or debris. So there's lots of different use cases. And of course, we are constrained by beyond line of sight rules. A lot of people don't necessarily adhere to that. If they're flying below tree height and over their own land, it's not such an issue. We do have a lot of crewed aircraft that a lot of mustering pilots hate heights. They only fly just above tree height, which is typically where a drone flies. So that's one of the things I do talk about a lot. Particularly someone from an urban area can go to a very remote area and feel like there is no one there. There is actually someone everywhere on the planet. Just because you can't see them doesn't mean they're not there. And people can appear unexpectedly in even the most distant places from cities.
I'm curious to see as well this year, like what would be your top 3 goals?
Well, I should. I have published books before, and I should publish the drone. I've got a drone ebook that I've been working on, and it's just all my notes from all the workshops I've been running for these however many years. So it would actually be relatively easy to put together, but I keep having other projects and rushing off. But I really must get that done this year. My other goal, I've probably got two, apart from the house renovations, that's the banging in the background. But the other one is to go back to remote areas with the drone to the stations that I know and take a lot more footage, because most of the images and videos I have were actually taken from helicopters. For various reasons, I've been running around attending conferences and whatnot and haven't got back, but I'm hoping to this year, because they've had a very, very good season as well. And a lot of the footage is quite surprising to people, because a lot of people don't know that the largest cattle stations are in Australia, and a typical head of a mob of cattle is 1,000 head, or even several thousand head, which is quite an impressive sight. So they are a fabulous thing to photograph.
You seem to be posting a lot about the Gravity Industries guy as well. I've seen him fly in Dubai. These races are very crazy. What is your take on taking a human and strapping a jetpack to a human?
Oh, I just absolutely love it. I just think it's fantastic, and I wish they'd been invented when I was in my 20s, because I would be over there begging for a job, because I absolutely loved it, and it's not a cheap thing to do, but it was so worth it. And we were really lucky, because I took my son as well. This was last October, and Richard Browning was actually there on that day as well. Fabulous. Like a lot of technology, it's not by necessity. They can't help how unergonomic it is. My biggest fear actually is walking up the stairs to get onto the platform, that I was going to turtle and not be able to get back up, because it is a heavy weight on your back. And I think a lot of men don't necessarily realise how much naturally stronger they are than the average woman. Whether you like it, that's just a fact. So for me, being older and a woman, it was like harder, but I absolutely loved it. And like I said, if I was younger, I would be over there begging for a job, because I just think it's amazing. I think flying taxis are a ridiculous idea. There's so many issues with that, but to be able to put something on your back and your arms and then just fly off, that's amazing. Yeah.
I'm
So
curious to hear why do you think, flying taxis, because some companies like Uber have been trying that. Why do you think it's not a good idea?
we already have helicopters. So what is the point? And nobody's actually released figures on how much passengers are going to pay. But just last week, I was hearing that they would be paying a similar amount to what they would pay if they chartered a helicopter. Well, why would you get a flying taxi? There's also power issues. How long are they going to be able to fly? Well, at the moment, they can't fly very far, very long because of the different kinds of power that we have access to. We need a breakthrough in power for aviation, really. My favourite thing that I wheel out, and I did actually mention this last week, what happens when passengers fight on an uncrewed aircraft? There's no one there to sort them out. I mean, it could be family members, whoever. I don't want to be up in an uncrewed aircraft with no staff on board and have passengers fighting. And nobody wants helicopters landing next to them, where they live, because they're too noisy. They won't want these landing next to where they live either. There's no real benefits. They're solving a problem we don't have, and also energy-wise, they're not environmentally friendly. Very bad idea in that department. There are maybe some specific use cases where you could justify, say, for example, you've got a city and there's one main bridge and the bridge is damaged and untrafficable and you need to get a lot of people across. You could use the water or you could put them in the air, something specific like that. But as a general theme, it's just not, it's kind of crazy. I also, personally, I like a person who has a vested interest in keeping it airborne, sitting up the front, rather than someone watching a screen tucked away somewhere. We also have the solar weather issue because no one is talking enough about solar storms and the fact that we will lose telecommunications when there is, and it's only a matter of time. It might be 1,000 years, it could be next week, we don't know, when there is a really massive solar storm, because redundancy, as far as I can tell, has not been built into our communication systems, and now everything is becoming so dependent on GPS. We lose GPS. If you're in a conventional aircraft and they lose a GPS signal, well, then you've got the pilot who will do, if it's at night, they'll have to do calculations to ascertain where they are and where they need to point to land. During the day, they obviously look out and they follow roads and rivers and other recognised landmarks. Whereas if you're in an uncrewed system and you lose your communication to the brains, which are back wherever in some office somewhere, it's not good. I mean, it'll be interesting to see too what comes out of that LATAM flight that had a sudden drop en route from Sydney to New Zealand just recently, because there are software glitches. Software is never perfect because people aren't perfect. People make the software. Lots of issues. But the jetpack thing, I love that.
What about the 350 km/h drone that filmed this F1 car? I believe it was Red Bull that made it. It was quite impressive how fast it got, but also the filmography quality.
Yeah, look, that's just a beautiful work and done by the same crew, I gather, that did the Red Bull bike race video as well, which is just incredible. And it's so good to see people who are absolutely world-class, top of the game. I don't know anyone else who could do that. Maybe there are others who could do that to that standard, but as far as I know, there aren't. What they've done with that bike race and with the Formula One, following that car around, and just to see the problem solving, how they, so it took more than a year for them to actually make that drone that filmed the final sequence. But that is why we want kids in drones. And I know it's why Defence have a drone racing team here, because they say it's not just flying, it's about repairing, problem solving, organising, planning. It involves all the things that Defence Forces need. It involves so many different skills that are good for any kind of employment, actually. Yeah.
Where can people find out more about you, Fiona?
Well, I've got a website, which is actually should be on my to list actually, because it needs renovating. My website dates back to 2003, just fionalake.com.au. I've also got a stack of social media channels, and they're all a little bit different. LinkedIn, it would be my favorite, because it's, yeah, the quality on LinkedIn now of the conversations is really good, very informative, and there's, you know, some fantastic innovators and leaders on LinkedIn now.